They laughed at the old man in his wrinkled uniform, called him a fake, said he just wanted free food. Then a young Marine walked in and dropped to his knees. His name was Frank Morrow, 84 years old, bones stiff from winters long past, and a mind still sharp as a bayonet. Every year on Veterans Day, he wore the same uniform, not because he wanted attention, he hated that part, but because it reminded him of who he used to be and the brothers he left behind. The fabric was faded, the buttons a little loose. The name patch barely clung to the chest, but he wore it anyway, with pride. That morning, Frank walked into Gracie's diner, the same spot he'd been going to since 1962. Same stool, same waitress, same coffee that tasted like burnt hope and habit. He moved slowly, leaning on a cane that had more scratches than paint left. Heads didn't turn. Not right away. To most people, he was just another old man shuffling in for breakfast. But tucked into his chest pocket were 4 medals. 1 for bravery, 1 for service, and 2 for men who never came home. He took his seat near the window, ordered his usual, black coffee, 2 eggs over, white toast, no butter, and sat with his back straight, eyes scanning the room like he still expected someone to call out formation. Frank didn't need much, just his meal, and maybe one nod from someone who still remembered what the uniform meant. But this time, the room didn't give him that. It gave him something else entirely. The diner wasn't busy, but it wasn't quiet either. 2 men sat at the corner booth, mid-30s, baseball caps, too loud for the room. One sipped his coffee with a smirk. The other scrolled his phone between mouthfuls of pancakes. They noticed Frank, not with respect, with amusement. "Look at this guy," one of them muttered, not bothering to lower his voice. "Full costume and everything. Probably wants a free meal." The other chuckled. "Stolen valor. Happens all the time." Then louder, loud enough to make sure Frank heard. "Hey, Grandpa, where'd you get the uniform?" "eBay." Frank didn't flinch. He didn't turn. He simply lifted his coffee to his lips and sipped. Slowly. He'd heard worse in his life. Much worse. But the waitress, Ellie, froze. Tray in her hands, face caught between outrage and fear. She looked at Frank, unsure whether to speak or walk away. The men laughed again. One of them pulled out his phone and snapped a photo. Smile for the internet hero. Still, Frank said nothing. Not because he was weak, but because he knew silence was sometimes stronger than pride. His eyes stayed on the window, watching the leaves blow across the sidewalk. His medals caught the light. The same medals men had bled for, now treated like a joke by boys who'd never seen war. Ellie set his plate down gently, her voice quiet. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Morrow." Frank just nodded. "It's not your fault, dear." He picked up his fork with hands that once held a rifle, and quietly kept eating, while the noise behind him grew louder. But across town, someone else was already on their way, and they were about to bring silence of their own. The bell above the diner door jingled. Nobody looked up. Not at first. But then he stepped inside. Tall, clean-shaven, maybe 23. Dress blues, sharp crease, polished shoes that clicked on the tile. The kind of uniform that demanded silence just by entering the room. The young Marine scanned the diner. He didn't glance at the menu. He didn't speak to the hostess. His eyes went straight to the old man by the window. Frank Morrow, sitting alone. Fork in hand, back straight. The Marine walked forward, slow, purposeful. Every step rang louder than the laughter still coming from the booth in the back. The 2 men kept talking until they saw where he was headed. The Marine stopped directly in front of Frank. His chest rose, his jaw tightened. And then, he dropped to one knee. "Corporal James Reyes, United States Marine Corps," he said. "Sir, it's an honor." The room fell silent. Forks paused mid-air. Coffee cups stopped halfway to lips. Frank lowered his fork. His hand trembled slightly. Not from age, but from something deeper. "You don't have to do that, son," he said softly. The Marine didn't move, his voice steady, eyes fixed. "My grandfather was Corporal Mike Reyes. He said you saved his life in Korea. Said if I ever met a man named Frank Morrow, I should kneel." Frank blinked. For a moment, he wasn't in the diner anymore. He was in the snow. In the dark. Dragging a man through gunfire, one leg half frozen, heart pounding in his ears. He swallowed hard. "I thought he'd forgotten me." "Sir," the Marine replied, "he never did." And in the booth behind them, the two men who'd mocked him didn't say another word. Frank stared at the young Marine for a long moment. The diner around them faded. No clinking dishes, no murmurs, no sound at all. Just memory. "Your grandfather," he said, voice rough with time. "Mike Reyes, tall guy. Wouldn't stop talking about his dog back home." The Marine smiled. "That's him. He said you dragged him through 6 miles of snow with a bullet in your own leg." Frank nodded slowly. "Thought he was going to die that night." "So did I." He reached into his breast pocket and pulled out an old photograph. Faded, creased, worn down by decades. It showed 6 young men in uniform, arms around each other, grinning despite the cold. One of them was Mike Reyes. Another was Frank. He slid it across the table. "That's your grandfather, and that's me, before we lost the others." The Marine's eyes welled up. He picked up the photo with both hands, like it might fall apart if he didn't. He kept this same picture. It sat on his dresser until the day he died. Across the room, the waitress Ellie wiped her eyes. She wasn't the only one. Even the 2 men in the back, the ones who'd laughed, sat silent now, their faces pale. One of them stood up, slowly. He walked over, hands shaking slightly. "Sir, I'm sorry. I didn't know. I shouldn't have said what I did." Frank looked at him for a long second. Not with anger, not even disappointment, just a quiet sort of knowing. "You don't have to know someone's story to show them respect," he said gently. The man nodded, eyes low. Then he turned and walked out the door without another word. The photo sat in the center of the table now. Frank didn't touch his food again. The young Marine, James, ordered nothing. He just stayed seated beside the old man, hands folded, posture still perfect. No one asked them to move. No one tried to rush them. The whole diner adjusted to them like they were part of the foundation. Ellie brought over a fresh cup of coffee, no charge. Then another waitress added a slice of pie to the table, Frank's favorite. He didn't ask how she knew. And slowly, the silence in the room turned into something else. Respect, presence, recognition. One customer walked up and paid for Frank's breakfast, then another, and another, until the entire bill was covered, with extra. Ellie nodded at Frank quietly. "Whole room pitched in," she whispered. "Said you paid enough already." Frank didn't argue. He just nodded. The Marine finally spoke again. "After he passed, my grandfather left this. Said it belonged to the man who saved his life." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded American flag, neatly packed in a triangle, the stars facing out. "He wanted it to come home to you." Frank took it with both hands. His fingers trembled as they touched the cloth, soft as memory. He held it to his chest and closed his eyes. No medals, no speeches, just a folded flag, and the weight of a moment the world had forgotten, remembered again. Weeks passed. The story spread, not because Frank told it, but because someone else did. One of the customers in the diner posted a photo of the Marine kneeling. No hashtags, no filters, just the moment. The post went viral. Thousands of comments, hundreds of veterans sharing their own stories. Strangers writing letters to a man they'd never met, thanking him for service most of the world had forgotten. But Frank didn't read the headlines. He didn't care about going viral. He still came to the diner every Sunday, same seat, same breakfast. Except now, he was never alone. Sometimes James joined him in civilian clothes. Sometimes other vets stopped by. And every time he walked in wearing that same old uniform, people stood. Not out of pity. Not out of trend. Out of respect. Ellie had the photo framed. Frank and Mike, 1951, Korea. It now hung beside the diner's register, with a brass plate beneath it that simply read, "Real valor doesn't ask to be seen, but it should never be forgotten." One morning, as Frank finished his coffee, James asked him if he ever regretted it. Serving, sacrificing, carrying that weight all these years. Frank smiled faintly and looked out the window. Not for a second. What I regret is how long it took the world to remember. Then he stood up, straightened his wrinkled coat, and tipped his hat. Outside, the flag on the diner's pole snapped in the wind, and for once, the silence didn't feel empty. It felt earned. Frank never asked for thanks. He didn't need applause. He just wanted to remember and be remembered. What would you have done if you'd seen that moment? Let us know in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more real, powerful stories, right here on Stories Unfolded.